Kane Jackson didn't have time for trouble not when his 5-year-old daughter, Ava, was waiting in the backseat with a half-eaten grilled cheese and a juice box. But the moment he heard a sharp, "Hey, let go of me," outside the gas station, he dropped the bag of dollar store diapers and bolted toward the shouting. A man in an expensive-looking suit had cornered a woman near the ice machine, his hand gripping her wrist a little too tight and his tone low and aggressive. The woman looked furious but also trapped. "Hey," Kane shouted, stepping between them without hesitation. "She told you to let go." The guy scoffed but didn't release her. "Mind your business, man. You don't know who I am." Kane didn't blink. "I don't care who you are. Let her go." The woman yanked her arm free as Kane stepped in closer, his frame tense but steady. The guy cursed under his breath, muttered something about "not worth it," and stalked off to his black luxury SUV. Kane turned to the woman. "Are you okay?" She nodded quickly, brushing hair from her face. "Yeah, thanks, seriously, that could have gone." "Worse," Kane finished. "Yeah, I know. You sure he's not gonna follow you?" She glanced toward the SUV pulling off. "Doubt it, he's just persistent and annoying." Kane looked her over. She was wearing a simple navy coat, jeans, and boots, but there was something about her. Not makeup or hair, just presence. "I'm Kane," he said, offering his hand. She took it. Kiera Vaughn." There was a pause. Something flickered in her expression when he repeated her name, like she was waiting for recognition. But Kane just smiled politely. "You need a ride or anything?" he asked, glancing back toward his beat-up sedan. "I'll call a cab," she said quickly, then added, "but thank you, really." Kane hesitated, then turned toward his car. Ava was watching him through the window with wide eyes and a juice-stained smile. He waved. Her little hand waved back. "Is that your daughter?" Kiera asked. He nodded, rubbing his jaw. "Yeah, Ava, she's 5, smartest person I know." Kiera's eyes softened. "She's lucky to have you." He chuckled. "You might want to wait till you see me try to make spaghetti with no sauce." That made her laugh. It was warm and real. "Well, now I'm curious." Something about her felt familiar, but Kane couldn't place it. She didn't act like most people he'd met around here. She wasn't flashy, but she stood out. Confident, poised, and yet kind. She didn't look like she belonged in this run-down gas station on a Tuesday afternoon. And yet here she was. "Where you headed?" he asked. "I was staying downtown," she said, "but I think I'll grab a coffee and figure out my next move." Kane checked the time. He was supposed to drop Ava at his sister's in half an hour before heading to his second shift at the warehouse. But something about leaving her alone didn't sit right. "There's a diner 2 blocks down," he said. "Good coffee, bad pie. If you want, I can walk you there." Kiera tilted her head. "You sure?" "I don't like leaving people with creeps lurking around." She smiled. "All right then." Kane told Ava he'd be right back. His sister was already on her way, and then walked Kiera down the sidewalk. They talked about nothing at first: weather, traffic, the broken stoplight on 8th Street. But somehow, it felt easy. "So," Kane said as they reached the diner, "you from around here?" "Not really," she said. "Grew up in Boston. I've been traveling a lot." "Work?" She hesitated. "Something like that." Before he could ask more, her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen and sighed. "I should go." "Pushy guy again?" "No," she said quietly. "Just family stuff." "Got it," he didn't press. "Well, if you ever need backup again, you know where to find me." She stepped closer. "Do I?" He grinned. "This town's not that big." Kiera looked at him for a long second, and then, out of nowhere, she leaned in and kissed his cheek. "Thanks for being decent." And then she turned and walked inside the diner, leaving Kane standing there with his heart thudding a little harder than it should have been. He didn't see her again for 3 days. It was a Friday evening, and Kane was late picking up Ava from school. His car had overheated again, and he was halfway through calling a tow when a sleek black Audi pulled up beside him. The window rolled down. "Need a ride?" Kiera asked, sunglasses perched on her head, smile teasing. Kane blinked. "You drive an Audi." She shrugged. "I like smooth rides." He laughed, but his eyebrows rose. "You said you were traveling light." "I didn't say I was broke." She pulled open the passenger door. "Come on, hop in, I'll take you to Ava's school." Something in him hesitated, but then he glanced at the steam rising from his car and climbed in. The inside of the car smelled like jasmine and leather. Her phone mounted on the dash had a calendar full of meetings and appointments. She tapped it off fast. "Busy schedule?" he asked. "Something like that," she said, then changed the subject. They picked up Ava, who immediately took to Kiera like she'd known her forever. Kiera even let her pick the music on the ride home, and Kane watched in quiet amazement as his daughter giggled in the backseat to Taylor Swift. "You're good with kids," he said once Ava ran inside with her backpack. Kiera smiled softly. "I like her. She reminds me of me when I was little, sharp, curious, no filter." Kane paused. "You grew up pretty different than her, I'm guessing." She nodded. "Yeah, but I wish I hadn't." It was the first time she looked sad. "You okay?" he asked. She looked at him, eyes soft. "I will be." And then, like it was the most natural thing in the world, she reached for his hand. And Kane knew right then he didn't care who she was or what she did. He just wanted to see her again. Kane had learned to trust his instincts. Years in construction, followed by warehouse shifts and late-night parenting, had sharpened his ability to read people. And yet, Kiera Vaughn was still an enigma wrapped in a designer trench coat. She showed up again the following week, this time outside the community center, where Kane volunteered on Saturdays. He was hauling boxes of canned goods when her voice cut through the parking lot. "You always this generous with your time?" she asked, stepping out of a silver Range Rover that hadn't been there a second ago. He didn't answer right away, mostly because he was too busy wondering why a woman who radiated boardroom power was standing in a cracked parking lot, surrounded by dented minivans and rusted pickups. "I try," he said finally, setting the box down on the curb. "What are you doing here?" "I asked around," she replied. "Someone said you helped out here. I figured owed you a coffee." "You drove across town to bring me coffee." She held up a cup and a croissant. "I didn't know what you liked." Kane wiped his hands on his jeans and accepted the drink. "Thanks." Kiera stood beside him, watching volunteers shuffle in and out of the center. "So you do this every weekend?" she asked. "Yeah, it's not much, but my mom used to run the food pantry here. I guess I just kept showing up after she passed." She didn't speak for a moment. "I like that." Kane glanced at her. "You always this curious about people you barely know?" "I'm not usually curious about anyone," she said, "but you're not like the people I usually meet." He raised an eyebrow. "What kind of people do you usually meet?" "The kind who know exactly what they want and take it. No hesitation, no apologies." "Sounds exhausting." "It is." They stood in silence for a beat, the sounds of the city humming around them. "You ever think about leaving this place?" she asked suddenly. "Sometimes," Kane admitted, "but Ava's got her cousins here. My sister helps out when she can. It's not perfect, but it's stable." Kiera turned toward him. "What if stable isn't enough?" He looked at her, really looked. "What are you running from?" She blinked. "Who says I'm running?" "You showed up at a gas station looking like you didn't belong. Then you saved me from walking 5 miles with a busted radiator. Now you're tracking me down with croissants and questions. You're running from something." Kiera didn't answer. Instead, she leaned against the hood of her SUV and stared across the lot. "My father thinks I should marry a man I don't love to protect his company's image," she said finally. "He's got this idea that legacy is more important than happiness." Kane folded his arms. "And what do you think?" "I think I've spent the last 10 years trying to be the perfect daughter, perfect investor, perfect face for the family name. But lately, I'm starting to wonder who I'd be if I stopped doing what everyone expected." "And that guy at the gas station?" "An arranged fiancé. He doesn't love me, he just wants access." Kane frowned. "Access to what?" She hesitated. "My trust fund, my last name, my silence." He let that settle between them. "You ever thought about just walking away?" he asked. "I have, but I've never met anyone who made me believe I'd be okay on the other side." He tilted his head. "You think I'm that person?" "I think you might be." That night, Kane found himself replaying her words as he tucked Ava into bed. She was already half asleep, clutching a stuffed bear that had seen better days. "Daddy," she mumbled, "who was that pretty lady in the shiny car?" He brushed a curl from her forehead. "A friend." "Is she gonna be my mommy?" Kane froze. "Where'd you get that idea?" "I dunno," Ava yawned. "She looked like someone who'd make pancakes." He kissed her forehead and turned off the light, his chest tight. The next morning, Kane drove to the mechanic shop where his old sedan had been sitting for a week. The bill was more than he made in a month, and the guy behind the counter didn't offer a payment plan. He was about to walk out when the receptionist called his name. "Someone left this for you," she said, holding out an envelope. Inside was a receipt paid in full. Kane's stomach dropped. There was no name, but he didn't need one. Later that afternoon, he called the only number he had for her. She picked up on the second ring. "You paid for my car?" he asked. "You needed it," she replied, "and I had the means." "I didn't ask you to do that." "I know." "Why?" "Because the last time someone helped me just because they could, I was 8 years old and living in a hotel room with no electricity. No one should have to ask for kindness." Kane exhaled slowly, his hand curling around the steering wheel. "Come to dinner," he said. "Tonight, my place." There was a pause. "I don't want you to feel obligated," she said. "I'm not, I just want to make you spaghetti, no sauce." She laughed. "I'll bring wine." When Kiara arrived that evening, she wasn't wearing anything fancy. Just a navy sweater and jeans, her hair pulled back, her smile uncertain. Ava greeted her at the door with a drawing of the three of them holding hands under a tree. Kiera crouched down and took it with both hands like it was a priceless sculpture. "It's going on my fridge," she whispered. Dinner was chaotic. The spaghetti boiled over, Ava spilled milk across the table, and the power flickered once from the old wiring. And yet, Kiera looked more at home than Kane had ever seen her. After Ava was tucked into bed again, Kiera wandered into the living room and ran her fingers along the edge of a photo frame. "You're a good father," she said. Kane joined her on the couch. "I'm trying." "You're doing more than try." She turned toward him, her expression open, vulnerable. "I don't want to marry someone who sees me as an asset," she said. "I want to be chosen, not for my money, not for my family, for me." Kane didn't hesitate. "Then don't marry him." "I need a plan. I can't just disappear." "I'm not asking you to disappear," he said. "I'm asking you to stay." Kiera looked at him like she was seeing something she'd been searching for without knowing it. Then she reached over and took his hand. "Okay," she whispered. Let's make a new plan. Kane didn't know what he'd expected when he asked Kiera to stay, but it certainly wasn't waking up to the scent of fresh cinnamon and the sound of Ava's giggles bouncing off the kitchen walls. The sun had barely cracked the horizon, but the small apartment already felt warmer than it had in years. He rubbed the sleep from his eyes and followed the sound, stopping short in the doorway. Kiera stood barefoot in his tiny kitchen, apron tied awkwardly over her sweater, flipping French toast, while Ava sat on the counter handing her strawberries one by one. The radio played something soft in the background, and for a second, Kane didn't move. He just watched. "You're going to burn that if you keep staring," Kiera said without turning around. "I wasn't staring," he lied, stepping inside. "You were definitely staring," Ava said, grinning as she held out a strawberry. "She put cinnamon on it, you never do that." "Guess I'll have to step up my game," Kane replied, taking the berry and popping it into his mouth. Kiera flipped the last slice onto a plate and turned to face him, her expression unreadable. "I didn't sleep much. Thought it'd be useful." He took a breath. "How long can you stay?" Kiera hesitated. "That depends. There's a board meeting next week. My father expects me there." "You planning on going?" "I'm not sure yet." They didn't say anything more as Ava dug into her breakfast, humming to herself. But the silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was full of questions neither of them were ready to ask out loud. Later that afternoon, Kane's sister, Tasha, arrived to take Ava for the weekend. She raised an eyebrow when she spotted Kiera sitting on the couch, flipping through a parenting magazine Ava had left out. "You didn't mention company," Tasha said, pulling Kane aside near the door. "She's a friend." Tasha's eyes narrowed. She wears shoes like that often when she's just being friendly. Kane glanced at the pointed heels Kiera had kicked off near the coffee table. "It's complicated." Just don't screw it up. Ava likes her." As soon as the door shut behind them, Kane turned to Kiera. "You want to get out of here for a bit." She looked up. "Where would we go?" "Anywhere that doesn't have crayon on the furniture." They ended up in an old bookstore tucked between a laundromat and a pawn shop. The place smelled like dust and old paper, and the owner greeted Kane like an old friend. "I didn't peg you for a bookstore guy," Kiera whispered as they browsed. "I used to come here when I needed quiet. My mom always said if you can't afford a vacation, get lost in a book." Kiera ran her fingers along the spines. "She sounds like she was brilliant." She was tough too. She didn't let much slide. After a while, they ended up in the back, sitting on mismatched chairs in a forgotten reading nook. The light filtered in through a high window, catching the gold in Kiera's eyes. "I've been thinking about what you said," she murmured. "About what?" "Starting over." He leaned back and, "I've got properties under my name, a trust, a board seat. If I walk away from all of it, I lose my vote, my leverage, everything I've worked for." "Then don't walk away. Run your own game." Her eyes met his. "You think it can?" "I think you've already started." Kiera reached into her coat and pulled out a small envelope. She handed it to him. "What's this?" "I talked to my attorney this morning. That's a proposal to move part of my holdings into a charitable foundation, one that helps single parents. I want you to help run it." Kane stared at her. "You're serious?" "Dead serious. I've been surrounded by men who only care about profit margins and brand optics. I want someone who understands what it means to fight for something real. I build shelves and haul pallets. I'm not a businessman." "You fight for your daughter. You show up when no one else does. That's exactly what I need." He exhaled slowly. "This changes everything." "I know." They sat in silence, the buzz of the city muffled by the thick walls. Finally, Kane asked, "Why me?" Because you never looked at me like I was a paycheck or a problem. You just saw me. He didn't know what to say to that, so he took her hand instead. That night, Kane found himself driving her back to the penthouse suite he hadn't known she owned until she gave him the address. It was 30 floors above anything he'd ever stood on, with a view that made the city look like a toy model. "This is where you live?" he asked as she punched in the access code. "Sometimes, mostly when I need to remind myself who I'm supposed to be." Inside, the space was sleek and modern glass, marble, and soft lighting, but it didn't feel lived in. No photos, no clutter, no warmth. "You hate it here," Kane said, walking slowly through the living room. "I hate what it represents." "Then why are you still here?" "Because I didn't know where else to go." He turned to her. "You do now." Kiera looked at him, something unspoken flickering in her gaze. Then she stepped forward and kissed him. It wasn't tentative. It wasn't cautious. It was desperate and full of all the things they hadn't said. Kane pulled her closer, his hands anchoring her to the moment as if he was afraid she'd vanish again. When they finally pulled apart, Kiera whispered against his chest, "Stay tonight." Kane hesitated. "Ava's not with me, but I need to be back early." "I'll make breakfast. You can be gone before she wakes up." He nodded. Later, as they lay tangled in sheets that probably cost more than his rent, Kane stared at the ceiling. "This world of yours," he said quietly, "it's not built for people like me." Kiera turned toward him. "Then let's build one that is." He didn't answer. He didn't have to. Because in that moment, he believed her. Rain fell in a soft mist over the city, the kind that clung to skin and blurred the skyline. Kiera stood at the window of her penthouse, arms crossed, watching the water streak down the glass. Her father's voice still echoed faintly in her head from the call she had ended only minutes ago. "You're throwing away everything our family built." That was what he'd said after she informed him she would not be attending the board meeting. After she told him she was resigning her position and shifting her shares into the newly formed foundation. He hadn't shouted. He didn't need to. Disapproval from him came like a scalpel, precise, cold, and cutting. But she didn't flinch this time. She turned from the window and glanced at the suitcase by the door. It wasn't packed with designer gowns or curated jewelry. Just jeans, sweaters, and a single framed photo of her mother, the only one she had that hadn't been taken by a magazine photographer. The elevator dinged. Kiera opened the door before Kane could knock. He stood there in a charcoal coat, hair damp from the rain, Ava perched on his hip with a blue umbrella clutched in her other hand. "Someone wanted to see where the princess lives," Kane said. Ava squirmed down and kicked off her boots as she stepped inside, eyes wide. "Whoa, this place is huge." Kiera crouched down. "Wanna help me pack the rest of my things?" Ava nodded with enthusiasm and darted toward the suitcase. Kane stepped in more slowly. "You sure about this?" he asked. Kiera nodded. "I'm not running. I'm choosing." He looked around the pristine space, then back at her. "You don't have to give all this up." "I'm not. I'm giving up pretending it ever mattered." She moved past him, gathering a small stack of books and sliding them into a canvas bag. Kane watched her for a moment, then walked over to help, his movements quiet and precise. No questions, no doubts. "I got a call this morning," he said after a moment. She glanced over. "From who?" "The community center. They want me to head the expansion project. Said someone made a significant anonymous donation and listed me as the project lead." Kiera didn't look up. "Sounds like someone thinks you do a good job." "I told them yes." She paused, then smiled. "Good." Ava returned with a small velvet pouch. "Is this yours?" Kiera took it and opened the drawstring. Inside was a delicate silver locket, the one her mother had given her at 16. She hadn't worn it in years. She fastened it around her neck without a word. They left the penthouse that evening without ceremony. No final glances, no lingering regrets, just a doorman who held the elevator and a valet who didn't ask questions when she handed over her keys and said, "Keep it." Kane drove them back to his apartment. The rain had stopped by then, leaving the streets slick and reflective. Ava fell asleep in the back seat, her head tilted to one side, her stuffed bear tucked beneath her arm. "Do you think she'll be okay with all this?" Kiera asked softly. "She already is," Kane replied. "You saw the drawing she made yesterday. You were in it." Kiera leaned her head against the window. "She's braver than I was at her age." "She's got you now." That night, after Ava was tucked into bed, Kane lit a single candle on the kitchen counter and pulled out 2 glasses. He poured wine into one and handed it to Kiera, then poured water into the other and raised it in a silent toast. "To new chapters," he said. She clinked her glass to his, "and honest beginnings." He took a sip, then set the glass down. "So what happens next?" Kiera didn't hesitate. "We build something together, not just a foundation or a name, a life." "What about when the press starts asking questions? They'll find you, they'll find me." "Then let them." A knock interrupted them. Kane opened the door to find Tasha standing there, holding a small stack of envelopes. "These came to your P.O. box. Thought you'd want them." She handed them over, then peered past him to where Kiera stood barefoot in the kitchen, pouring more wine. "You sticking around?" Tasha asked. Kiera stepped forward. "If that's all right." Tasha studied her for a moment. "You hurt him, I'll bury you." Kiera didn't blink, understood. Tasha nodded once, satisfied. "Good. Now, I'm going to take Ava tomorrow so you two can have a day to breathe. You'll need it." After she left, Kane and Kiera sat on the couch, the envelopes forgotten on the coffee table. Outside, the moon broke through the clouds, casting a soft glow through the window. "I think I love you," Kiera said suddenly. Kane didn't move. "You don't have to say that." "I know, but I wanted to. I've spent so long calculating every word, every move. I don't want to do that anymore." He turned to face her. "Then don't just be here." She leaned into him, her hand finding his. "I was terrified," she whispered, "that you'd see all of me and walk away." "You were never the one who needed to be afraid," Kane replied. "It was me. I never thought someone like you would want someone like me." "I don't want someone like you," she said. "I want you." He kissed her then, not with urgency, but with certainty. The next morning, they walked hand in hand into the community center's main hall, where the board had gathered to discuss the expansion. Kane introduced Kiera as a partner in the foundation, and no one dared question it. Later that month, the foundation officially launched with a ribbon-cutting ceremony. Kiera stood beside Kane, their names engraved together on the plaque beneath the entrance arch. Cameras flashed. Reporters asked questions. A few headlines speculated about the mysterious romance between the reclusive heiress and the local single father. But none of that mattered. Because later that night, after the last guest had gone, Kane carried Ava upstairs while Kiera cleaned the last of the dishes. When he came back down, she was sitting on the couch with a small velvet box in her lap. He froze. "What's that?" She opened it. Inside was a simple gold band. "I don't need a ballroom or a guest list," she said. "I just need you and Ava." He walked to her slowly, eyes never leaving hers. "You sure?" "I've never been more." He took the ring and slid it onto her finger. Outside, the city buzzed with its usual noise, but inside, in the small space they now called home, everything was quiet, steady, whole. And for the first time in a long time, neither of them needed to run. The spring air carried the scent of cherry blossoms through the open windows of the newly renovated community center. Sunlight streamed in across the polished wooden floors, catching the glass panes that had been replaced just last week. Children's laughter echoed from the outdoor playground, and inside, the hum of conversation filled the halls. Kiera adjusted the strap on her shoulder bag as she walked through the main corridor, pausing to greet a few volunteers. A young mother with a toddler in her arms stopped her near the donation shelves. "You're the one who started all this, right?" the woman asked. Kiera glanced around at the rows of new supplies, the refurbished classrooms, the bulletin board now filled with upcoming programs and workshops. "I had help," she said. "A lot of good people made this happen." "What you're doing here, it's changing lives," the woman said, her voice soft with emotion. "Thank you." Kiera didn't know how to respond at first. Praise had always come in the form of performance metrics and stockholder applause, but this was different. This was real. A familiar hand slid into hers a moment later. Kane nodded to the woman and guided Kiera out into the courtyard where more families had gathered. Ava was crouched by a flower bed with Tasha, planting tulips with a group of other children. She was wearing a green apron with her name written across the front in glitter paint. "She's been asking about summer camp," Kane said, watching her. "The one upstate with the horses. I think she's ready." Kiera squeezed his hand, then "Let's send her." He looked over at her. "You sure it's 3 weeks?" "She's brave, Kane, and she knows we'll be here when she gets back." They sat on the low stone wall under a blooming dogwood tree. The past few months had moved fast, but every step had felt intentional. Kiera had sold her penthouse and moved into a modest brownstone just 2 blocks from Kane's. The foundation had acquired a second property for a shelter program, and her father, after several very public interviews, had ceased any further legal threats. She hadn't seen him since. She didn't need to. Kane leaned close. "I've been thinking about something." Kiera turned to him. "What's that?" He pulled a small envelope from inside his jacket. The paper was thick, cream-colored, and sealed with a gold wax stamp. "I was going to wait until we were somewhere more private," he said as he handed it to her. "But then I remembered you hate waiting." She opened it slowly. Inside was a single card, an invitation, handwritten in simple black ink. "Dinner under the stars, just us. Wear something that makes you feel unstoppable." She looked up. "You plan something?" He nodded. "Tonight, rooftop of the old theater. Fixed it up after hours. Thought it was time for a proper night." She smiled. "You're full of surprises." "You haven't seen the best one yet." That evening, Kiera stepped out of the brownstone wearing a deep crimson wrap dress and a vintage gold pendant she'd found in a thrift shop last week. Her heels clicked against the sidewalk as she turned the corner and saw Kane waiting beside his truck, dressed in a crisp navy suit, his tie loosened and collar open just enough to make her heart skip. He opened her door without a word, and they drove in easy silence through the city. The streets were lit with warm amber as dusk settled. When they reached the theater, Kiera followed him up the old staircase that now held new railings and fresh paint. On the rooftop, strings of soft white lights crisscrossed above a linen-draped table. A pair of lanterns flickered on either side, and a small speaker played music low and smooth. At the edge of the rooftop, a telescope pointed at the sky. Kiera stepped into the space slowly, turning in a full circle. "You did all this." "I wanted to take you somewhere that didn't remind you of boardrooms or ballrooms, just sky and possibility." She walked to him, her fingers brushing his lapel. "You've already given me those." He took her hand and led her to the table. Dinner was simple but perfect: grilled vegetables, lemon herbed chicken, and a small chocolate tart they shared under the stars. Afterward, Kane rose and pulled something from his jacket pocket, a small box. Kiera stood slowly, her breath catching. "I know we're building a life that doesn't look like anyone else's," Kane said, "but I don't want another day to go by without knowing you're mine. Not just in the way we live or love, but in every way." He opened the box. Inside was a delicate ring, a single sapphire set in gold. "I picked blue," he said, his voice soft, "because it's steady, like the ocean, like the sky, like how it feels every time you walk into a room." Kiara didn't speak. She couldn't. So instead, she reached out her hand. "I've never wanted anything more," she whispered. He slipped the ring onto her finger, and the stars above seemed to burn a little brighter. They danced that night, barefoot on the rooftop, lanterns swaying in the breeze. The music faded into the background as their laughter filled the space. Weeks later, they married beneath a canopy of wildflowers in the same courtyard where they'd first walked hand in hand. Ava stood proudly between them, holding the rings in a velvet pouch and announcing, "You may now kiss the bride," before either of them had a chance to finish their vows. The ceremony was small, just family, a few close friends, and a dozen kids from the center who insisted on being flower bearers. Kiera walked down the aisle without a veil, without a script, only a heart open to everything that came next. And Kane met her there, not with promises written by someone else, but with eyes full of certainty, and a vow spoken so quietly that only she could hear it. "I'll love you through every version of ourselves." They signed the papers later that afternoon, then spent the evening dancing in the same theater rooftop where it all began. The lights stayed on long past midnight. And in the days that followed, they kept building slowly, intentionally together. Ava started horseback lessons that summer. Kiera launched a mentorship initiative for young women in the city. Kane helped open a second community center location in the East District. And every night, no matter how busy the day had been, they always ended it the same way on the back porch of their new home. A candle between them, laughter in the air, and fingers curled together like pages in a story they were still writing. Only now, they knew exactly how it would end. Together, always,